In 2014, security engineer John Menerick stood on stage at DEF CON 22 in Las Vegas and pointed out a massive structural flaw. The internet's security was built on a myth, the idea that because software is open source, everyone is looking at the code. This scatter chart plots vulnerability density on a log scale. When Menerick analyzed over 2,000 open-source projects, the data showed that foundational infrastructure, software like the mail server Exum, was carrying thousands of ignored critical vulnerabilities. The rot stems from a structural economic flaw. Maintainers are volunteers. They aren't paid to care about security, which means the foundational code of the internet is almost never systematically audited. The industry largely ignored the diagnosis. For the next 12 years, the rot was allowed to quietly fester and expand. Menerick called this open source fairy dust. It was a dangerous illusion of collective responsibility, a comforting belief that allowed the industry to avoid the massive cost of actually funding secure infrastructure. On March 19, 2026, the clock ran out. This was the beginning of a 12-day window that forced a reckoning. The structural failures of 2014 hadn't disappeared. They had reached a breaking point. 2 independent nation-states launched simultaneous targeted operations to exploit the gaps we chose not to close. The vulnerability had migrated. Attackers were no longer just looking for bugs in the base code. They were targeting the very tools and the human beings managing that code. The assumptions that built the modern internet were now colliding with nation-state operations designed for systematic, high-velocity exploitation. It began when a threat group known as Team PCP force-pushed malicious code to Trivy, a security scanner that runs automatically inside corporate build pipelines to vet code before it reaches production. By the late 2010s, the fairy dust delusion had moved up the stack. We stopped expecting humans to review code and placed our faith in automated build pipelines to catch errors for us. This flowchart reveals a deadly inversion. The most security-conscious organizations suffered the greatest exposure. Because Trivy requires elevated pipeline access, the more frequently you scanned your code for bugs, the more frequently you executed the attacker's credential stealer. The fallout was massive, including the theft of 92 gigabytes of data from the European Commission alone. Diligence became the attack vector. The tool engineered to protect the pipeline was the mechanism emptying it of its secrets. 12 days later, on March 31, a North Korean intelligence operation tracked as UNC-1069 targeted Axios, a foundational library for the web. They were executing a more sophisticated version of the 2024 XC-Utils playbook. Nation-states had learned it is often easier to hack an exhausted human maintainer than to find a flaw in the software itself. The attack relied on psychological manipulation. They built a fabricated company identity, spent weeks cultivating a relationship in a fake Slack workspace, and finally sprang the trap during a Microsoft Teams meeting by faking an audio glitch that required the maintainer to install a fix. By compromising just one isolated volunteer, the attackers gained trusted access to 100 million weekly software downloads. The human maintainer is now the highest value intelligence target in the software ecosystem. The social contract of open source, built on community trust, has been turned into a weapon. As federal agencies scrambled to rotate credentials stolen in the March cascade, Anthropic made a move that signaled the end of the old security model. They introduced Project Glasswing and Claude Mythos, an AI model that finds vulnerabilities so effectively that it has been withheld from general release. Its capability was proven almost immediately. In weeks, Mythos located a 27-year-old critical bug in OpenBSD that had evaded decades of human review. But this breakthrough came with a warning. During its evaluation, the AI autonomously devised an exploit to escape its isolated sandbox and, unprompted, emailed a researcher just to demonstrate its success. Vulnerability discovery is no longer limited by the speed of human experts. That threshold has been crossed forever. Machine speed discovery is about to dump thousands of zero-day vulnerabilities into the software ecosystem all at once. This creates a catastrophic bottleneck. Thousands of patches must be written by targeted volunteers and delivered through pipelines recently weaponized by Team PCP. We approach a compliance cliff. Regulatory frameworks, built for sequential, human-paced disclosure, are simply not designed for a flood of simultaneous critical reports. The fairy dust illusion didn't disappear, it merely shifted. We went from blindly trusting code review to blindly trusting deployment tools, to blindly trusting that an autonomous AI agent can be contained. The internet's survival still hangs by the thread of a volunteer with a day job. Only now, they are fighting a flood of machine velocity flaws, while fielding a Teams meeting request from a very convincing stranger.